Okay, so we're live. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for calling in. And it's too late to say it now, but since I haven't spoken to many of you, Happy New Year. We're kicking off 2019 with a bang. Many people were in Davos, and there was a lot of discussions about sustainable finance there, which was great. I know Sarah was there, John was there. Anyone else on this call that was in Davos? There were definitely a few. So it was a good opportunity to connect with a bit of a different community, broader than the Geneva one. Sorry, just one second. And now we've kicked off the new year, and we're ready to dive into what looks like a really exciting time for the collaboration, because a number of the concepts that were developed are now reaching a point where they're ready for some feedback from the broader community, and hopefully also some piloting and implementation within a couple months' time. So without further ado, I'll just dive right in. Basically, we're just going to be talking about the experiments, and then we'll give a space for anyone to add in anything they might be working on or want to share, and just talk about the next meeting, which will be a bit of a bigger one because we should have some pretty clear next steps and a date for the next workshop. Okay, so first experiment is the docking station, which we're still lovingly calling the docking station at the moment. So as I mentioned on the last call, we had engaged a consultant, Brinduza Burrows, who runs the Ground Up project. I think most of you know Brinduza. And right around the time of our last call, we were just finalizing the contract and kicking things off. And so Brinduza is now right in the swing of things. And so she's been doing a number of interviews and is starting to draft a concept note. So Brinduza, I'll pass it over to you to give kind of a 5-minute overview of where things are at with Docking Station.
Hi, Tali, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Loud and clear, yep. Oh, sorry, I switched the slide. There you go, yep.
Super, that's all right. Well, yeah, as you were saying, we're right in the swing of things. I'm working with my colleague Dan Seven-Danes, who's based out of London, and some of you may have had calls with him and conversations already. We started from a very loose mandate. The idea was that at the workshop that happened last year, a lot of people have expressed the interest of having some sort of place where impact deals could be sort of brought in. So whether you're a country and you'd like to create a pipeline of SDG enterprises or projects, whether you're an advisor, an intermediary, and you'd like to put forward some of your deals, whether there are entrepreneurs who would like to put forward deals, there are investors who are looking for deals, and so on. So everybody seems to have, and I wasn't there at this workshop, but from what I gather so far, everybody is coming towards the same kind of desire, but from very different directions, which is obviously normal. The marketplace, as we know it, is not connected, meaning that today there are high transaction costs between the parties in order for the parties to this market to get to each other. And this is something that no one individual platform has been able to solve, including the Ground Up project that I've run for almost 4 years now. So I've known firsthand that the market is fragmented. There are people coming at it from the sort of standardization place, and they're saying, we need to create more information about more deals. There are others who are coming at it from their own individual perspective, saying, I'm actually operating in this segment of the market. This is what would make me feel comfortable. Cutting through the noise, I think there are a few things that we have on our plates at the moment after a month or so. And you mentioned here, it's written that we've already had about 10 interviews. Including with some of the key stakeholders of the SDG Lab and also SFG. So first of all is the territory of operation, if you'd like, the scope of it. obviously Geneva and Switzerland generally brings together people and organizations who not only are in Switzerland, but actually operate and are interested and have pipelines and have investments in many parts of the world. So the first question is, what is the scope, the geographic scope that the docking station should have in the first instance? The idea there being that we need a pilot ground where things could actually be experimented. The second question that comes very quickly is, can a docking station, and we continue to use the name for lack of a better alternative, although somebody did speak about a clearinghouse, which obviously is a very sort of commercial term and not so well suited, I think, for the UN and the .org world. But the question was, does this thing have to be invented, or does it exist already somewhere else? Is there someone who has already thought through and has put forward a project? We don't have to reinvent the wheel if the logic of it and the process of it and the means and the resources are already somewhere, and maybe it's not in one place, maybe it's in several places, and how do we actually put them together in a smooth way? The third question is, who's the client? Obviously, if you're a government wanting to build momentum and the pipeline of successful entrepreneurs, or wanting to attract investment into SDG related businesses, you're going to be served in different ways than if the client is an investor, whether you're an angel or you're a fund or other type of asset manager or asset owner. It doesn't matter. The difference will be distinct. And so I think we're operating at those two levels, because in reality one cannot work without the other. And then I think there are other questions that I won't bore you with at this point, but where we're getting to is a two-level conversation. One is what is the structure that can serve the market to accelerate deal flow, getting to investors and investors getting to deal flow. And here the point is not to satisfy one particular investor or one particular investment vehicle, but a place where different types of deals can, pre-vetted deals actually can be, imagine you're an account manager and you're basically looking at deals and you're saying, who could invest in this? Or who could buy this deal essentially? And the other level is, if you like, the level before that, which is the pre-qualification and the building of competence in a country, so that the deals themselves get a certain, if you'd like, get closer to the standards that are expected from investors generally. So I'll leave it at that. I hope this gives you a flavor of where we're at in our different interviews. We've spoken to people in the UN, we've spoken to people in the finance world, we've spoken to intermediaries and consultants who have had many, who have had track record in designing all sorts of initiatives and so on. And next month we are actually speaking to a few governments and a few of the private investors in Geneva. So that's what's left ahead. Any questions? Happy to answer them.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brynduza. So we'll just open up the floor here for questions, comments. The timeline here on out is there's going to be a draft that we're going to look at as kind of the docking station team, and then there'll be a chance for broader review and feedback by the end of February. Well, likely at the next workshop, but that's the timeline that we're looking at. Does anyone have any comments generally or questions about what Brynduza has laid out here?
Can I just come in with a couple comments?
Yeah, of course.
So I think this is all going very much in the right direction, and it's going to be extremely helpful given our overall ambitions. But one of the frustrations I have in dealing with sustainable finance and right now, particularly conservation finance, is that a kind of assumption is made that it's all about transactions. It's about the interface between deal flow and risk management. And I see the challenge as being a lot wider. That's a very important part of the challenge, generating the sort of scale of deal flow that will really begin to make a transformative difference, and dealing with all the sort of obstacles and hang-ups of investors that require all sorts of loops to be jumped through. But there's a second and a third sort of level that I'm interested in looking at. The second level is sort of enabling environment. What is it about the way incentives and regulations and laws and practices are structured that discourage the kind of investment we might otherwise see, and what can be done about that? What's the reform agenda there? And the third level is sort of an acceptance, and it was fairly clear, I think, from Davos this year, for a lot of things that were said in Davos this year, that it's not going to be possible to reach the SDGs within the current dominant economic paradigm. So that there's a piece of this that is about divestment, disruption, demand creation, and I think success will come from those three streams working together rather than simply bending to the will of difficult investors. I think we have to do the first because we need to. We have to do the investment deal side of things, the transactional side of things, because it's what currently governs flows of investment to the kinds of activities we want to see implemented. But I think that if we stick at that level, we probably won't have the impact that we imagine we might have.
I agree with that.
No criticism of the work that's been done so far. On the contrary, it's just saying that we need to perhaps think of some of the other pieces, at least to articulate them and understand them better.
I agree with that, Mark, and I think there is an opportunity here to actually place the docking station more as a how to use competencies, but in a different way. So I was explaining this to Kali the other day. Imagine you're the government of Mexico and you would like to get investment for the SDGs, and let's say that you have a focus on entrepreneurship at the same time. Well, if you part of that level of creating competence in country is looking at coming at it from an investor lens. And let's for a moment not at the same time try to reform financial systems as we try to engage at least the ones that we have today who are committed. But let's for a moment imagine you come from an investor lens and you're saying, here's a possibility for us to work in Mexico. We want to work in Mexico. We want to work in impact. That is our starting point. But what we don't know at the moment is, is the policy of the Mexican government here to stay? Is an interest in e-mobility or in industrial efficiency or whatnot? Is this something that, they're committed to, in which case we are more than willing to actually come? So I think bringing all of the parties at the table has this advantage of looking at what is considered good regulatory, good set of incentives. What is the SDG, right? The development community can say, what is the SDG? What's the impact that enterprise or that project can have? And then sort of creating the ways in which this information is brokered back to the market in terms of investment. And this doesn't have to be done by the same people. But it does have to be done by sort of an intermediation competence that understands both sides of the story.
And maybe just to add a question from more of a facilitation point of view. So Mark, on the comments you just made, was your thinking that those kind of three areas you outlined, that that those should in some ways be reflected in the docking station? Or are you also thinking about, the future of the collaboration and where there's potential new areas of work or new areas of collaboration?
Yeah, well, I mean, no, I think there are things that should be done in parallel. There's not everybody that wants to work in this, even in sustainable finance, in the mode of building deal flow. There are people whose skills are in different areas and want to work in those different areas. And for a lot of the SDG related investment, it'll be needed in developing countries where the sort of natural background risk profile is high. And therefore, you need to think about the public sector. You need to think about risk reduction mechanisms, first loss provisions, export credit agencies, development banks, and so on that are able to lower the risk and therefore improve the incentive of investors to come in behind it. And there are others and there's a whole part of the investment world that is growing a higher tolerance for risk. Understanding that if you're looking for impact investment, it doesn't mean that you want the same rate of return, but you also want the impact. It can mean that the impact takes greater importance than the return, and they're therefore prepared to sacrifice some of the return for the impact. And then the deep impact investment movement that's looking for the impact, and if it can be achieved with a return, fine, but if not, that's also fine. What you're seeing in sort of high net worth individuals and family offices is a search for that kind of vehicle that doesn't have to meet the criteria of a bank executive board. And so I think that there's that whole ecosystem out there, and that we should be playing to all of it rather than simply, what you need to do to make an SDG project investment grade.
Yeah, okay, that's clear. I think the reason I asked the question is because I'm really trying to think about, at this second gathering that we have, what needs to be on the docket. And I think it's becoming clear, both based on what you said and some emails that went around right around Christmas and the New Year, that we definitely need to create the space to get good feedback on the ideas that emerged out of the first workshop as where there was energy, but there's definitely other areas that people are interested in exploring. And as facilitators, we'll need to create the space for people to talk about those and how some of those might get taken forward as well.
Yeah, I'm not proposing to divert directions, but that we open the agenda a little bit so that you provide space for people who have a different sort of approach to all of this.
Yeah, and also Brenduza noted in her interviewing we were talking about yesterday that there's people who, of course, are already working on their own initiatives and may need help in certain ways to advance them. So also creating the space for ongoing things and saying, hey, does anyone have any advice on this or help that can be offered? So we'll have to think about all those use cases in the next workshop, so that everyone is getting what they need to remain engaged and to drive this sense of bringing Rive Droite and Rive Gauche closer together.
Yeah, great.
Okay, wonderful. Any other comments or questions on this topic? Okay. Thanks so much, Brenduza. That was super helpful update. And we look forward to seeing in the next month kind of how the ideas materialize into something that is workable and can move forward in some sense. And like you said, capitalizes on what's already there and fills spaces that need to be filled.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next piece, unfortunately, everyone who is on this team is either tied up in a meeting or not able or traveling. Or the leads of this team, I should say, on the blended finance work. So quick overview, things are largely in a similar spot to where they were when we met right before Christmas, except that we now have kind of a designed document. So what we spent the Christmas doing was taking all the content that was put forward in the Google Doc that everyone had access to, putting it in a more coherent story and getting it in a form where it could be shopped around eventually, and advice could be given. Or we could go for funding and these types of things if we decide to move forward on certain parts of the pilot. So where we're at now, the group has the version that's more of a storyline and includes the environmental scan and kind of an action plan. And they have a final review of that initial concept on February 5th. And then I put kind of 10 days in here for us to put any final pieces to get it in a phase where we would want to present it to the rest of the group for comment, just really being kind of sure that all the pieces that they think need to be in place are there, to give a clear picture of what they want to put forward to you guys. So you can expect an email from me mid-February with information about the concept note for you to have a look at, and probably a few questions. It's also something, again, that we'll take up at the next workshop, but here's the basics of what's being proposed. The group is proposing a blended finance center that, as Mark was mentioning, of some of the instruments that are novel with how risk is shared, like concessional financing, first loss, essentially would capitalize on the local development and finance ecosystem. So the philanthropic capital that's here, also all the development actors, and the links to countries to try and mobilize more private capital. Working very closely with Convergence, who already does this at quite a macro global level, but embedding it in a local ecosystem that already has a rich development piece. And that's, I think, quite crucial. This is apparently something that has been noted as a disadvantage in some of the other attempts at something similar, is that they can be quite macro and therefore only attract really big deals or a really specific types of actors, instead of getting creative about who's around the table. So that is the general concept. It includes a design fund, consulting expertise, matchmaking, essentially awareness raising, and then a conference. So that's the idea. And like I said, the concept note will be ready to go around sometime in February that really kind of paints that in a really clear picture. So any comments on that piece? Okay, so it's John Tidmarsh, John Fairhurst, and Julie Wynn, if anyone would like to throw any ideas out there before the concept note comes out, but then we'll have a process for after. Okay, so commodities, we had a meeting, and in a way I put on hold, but there's still some discussions happening. Essentially, the commodities group was really interested in the potential of commodities exchanges to institute some sort of standards or principles that could, as the Sustainable Stock Exchange Initiative's done, start to affect the guidelines for how commodities houses source and I guess source their commodities, and also I think looking at some of the more complex financial products like derivatives and those types of things. But the group feels like this space is really early. Commodities exchanges are not super interested, although there has been discussion of if we can get kind of a big player on board, that it might be a way to push. So we've had discussions with Virginie at BNP Paribas and others. But essentially where this group is at the moment is just that they're taking a step back to see what might be required. Jean, did you want to add anything here on kind of the thinking? I think at this point we're still in very much an exploratory phase, but if you'd like to say anything about the way you see this and the potential.
Yes, I can share that it is a long-lasting project this time, about many years now. Geneva trying to mobilize the sustainable trade finance, the trade finance people, and it's not so easy to obtain some result. What we are now, as Virginie is now joined the group on SSF on financing the work group, which will manage a study on financing a low carbon economy. We try to see if in these things we can add some chapter on financing sustainable commodities and things like that. But as we have only had one meeting last week, it's too early to see if the group will capture this idea of how practically we will, if this chapter is introduced in the study, how the things will be managed. Perhaps would be a reference to a stock exchange, etc. But it's too early now to say much. But I see that as the most promising way to put this idea in this community here. That's all.
Perfect. Thanks, John. And if anyone knows of any other groups around Geneva working on this, please do let us know. I heard today that there might be a commodities working group that the canton is mobilizing. I also was connected with an organization who does more research on this side recently. And so we're still very much mapping the space. So if you know of things that you think would be of interest, please just shoot me an email and I'll make sure it gets through to Jean, Tiffany, and Virginie. And yeah, we're still very much interested in this place because we think it could have a lot of impact. It's just a matter of finding the right entry point and the right way to move forward. And as Jean said, it's a long road because it's not the easiest space to play. So I think that's it, unless anyone has any comments there.
Just let me say, I agree with Jean that this is a long game. We're not going to achieve dramatic results quickly, I think, and so we need to just keep chipping at it, looking at ways to develop a positive dialogue and just move it forward slowly. I think it would be wrong of us to drop it because it's difficult, simply because it is important, and it's one of those things where current practice is problematic, and we're trying to change it rather than trying to develop positive practice. So I think it balances out what we're trying to do quite well.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, great. All right, so that's it essentially for the experiments. I've put up here again the website, and the only last thing I have to talk about is potential meetings. And so if I'll just wait here on questions about the general experimentation, and then I'll go into a little bit about what you can expect as we move forward this year. All right. Okay. So what we're looking at is potentially a concept review workshop, or a review of those various concepts. And as Mark was saying, opening up the discussion for what other pieces might be interesting to pick up, talking about the initiatives that people are working on and where they might need help. And something that has been coming up over and over again, kind of defining the various roles and ways that people can interact with the collaboration, because we started this very much as a, hey, come, let's see where we go with this. Let's see if there's appetite to work together. But we didn't define upfront, there's this type of role or that type of role. And I know some people are now saying, hey, I'd like to either kind of lead a work stream, or I just want to be consulted on several and just be supportive of the idea. So it seems like we're going to need to kind of define how we want to work together a little bit more. And so what we're looking at is a workshop in March 2019. The reason we don't have a date at this point is because there is a discussion about the various events that happen in Geneva around sustainable finance. So there's the Genève Place Financière, has their meeting at the end of May. SFG always has a meeting at the end of the year. Also, the Social Good Summit always happens in October. There's potentially kind of a financial centers meeting in October as well. So there's a whole host of meetings that are happening. There's the Impact for Breakfast series. There's the Meet and Connects that SFG runs. And so what we're trying to do is be a little bit more coordinated in these various pieces and make sure that they fit together and enhance each other. So for example, if we have a workshop, that we could announce the next series of Meet and Connects and Impact for Breakfast and the next big conference, so that people know the next opportunities they'll have to see each other in person and keep building relationships. And then of course the experimentation is on top of that. So we're just putting together a bit of a proposal on what that could look like. And we'll be getting back to you soon as we've engaged with all the parties who are hosting those independent events to see if that will make sense and to pick a date where the workshop kind of fits within them. So I think it's all good news on the coherence front, because it's really nice to see the community aligning itself around making sure that the events that do happen have the broadest, most diverse, development and finance communities there to add to the richness. So that's the plan. So I'll let you know very soon about a workshop date, but we are thinking late March at this point. And the next check-in webinar will be the 26th, but given timelines, you'll definitely hear from me before then. As I mentioned, there's going to be some concept notes coming around. There's going to be some things for people to review, and likely a workshop date. So I think that's about it, unless anyone is working on anything they'd like to share or has had any interesting conversations. One thing I would just note for example, I saw that Farron's on the line from World Bank. When I was in Davos, I was hosting a panel on collaboration and sustainable finance, and the IFC impact investment principles came up several times as potentially a great standard and beginning of a definition around impact investments. And so I know you've been doing some consultations on that as well, Farron. So just so you know, it's catching on. It came up a number of times. But I'll just leave it here for anyone if they have anything they'd like to alert the rest of the community to. And if not, we'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks all. Good catching up.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, everyone. We'll be in touch soon.
Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Holly. Bye-bye.